Welcome to Health Hacks. Today we're speaking about stress. How does stress affect your physical and your mental health? And what can you do in order to lower your stress levels and be more resilient to it? Today I have Dr. Alexis Cowan with me. She's a Princeton-trained PhD who operates at physiology and metabolism. She's specialized in cardiac biology, microbiome, and metabolism health and disease. She's working with medical professionals who are seeking to expand their evidence knowledge, and she's working with high-performance individuals who are seeking to increase their health and performance. Dr. Alexis Cowan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and that I was able to come in person, which will make it so much more fun.
Of course, yes. It's always great to see you. And I'm so thankful that you could come to New York today. Well, just to kind of start the whole conversation today about stress, you said that you had some personal experience with stress, and maybe you want to share some of your personal journey with that and how you overcame that challenge and became that strong and healthy and wonderful woman that you are today.
Yeah, sure. I would love to share. So, maybe just to preface, I'll say that stress can come in so many different forms. And so as a young child, I encountered a lot of environmental stress, I would say, in my life. So reflecting on my childhood, I realized that I was kind of exposed to a lot of black mold as a kid, and just the smell of water damage is kind of a telltale sign that there's mold in the environment. And mold secretes toxins that can directly impair mitochondrial function, and mitochondria are these powerhouses of our cell that are required for making all the energy that our cells need to perform normal functions, but also to repair and to regenerate. And so that was kind of coupled with this recurring strep throat that I was encountering as a child, that actually ended up pulling me out of school because I just kept getting sick. So in my early childhood, I was really exposed to a lot of stress from the environment and from illness in my body. Yeah. And then soon after that, my weight kind of exploded in the year and a half that I was homeschooled. And when I went back to third grade, I was weighing basically double my classmates. And that kind of ballooned up through maybe sophomore year of high school. So I was experiencing a lot of physical stress from being obese and just not, being comfortable in my body. There was also the psychological stress of not really feeling like you fit in with your peers and just having a kind of just feeling out of place in a lot of ways, which was also counterbalanced. If people aren't watching, I'm mixed race, and I also grew up in a very rural, Caucasian area. So I already kind of didn't feel like I fit in that way. So it was kind of compounded with my weight problems. And I also had a lot of skin issues and upper respiratory issues at the time too, just throughout my childhood and teen years. And so interestingly though, this time of my life, I was encountering a lot of unconscious stressors or stressors that were kind of impacting me without my consent. But when I decided to take control of my health, it was really about reframing stress as a thing that I'm going to actively engage in. And so what I mean by that is basically I decided to commit to my physical health. I started going to the gym every day and working out for 2 hours a day, an hour of cardio and an hour of strength training. And so that kind of stress is kind of a hormetic stress, which is referred to as hormetic stress, which is basically stress that you engage in voluntarily that helps to make you stronger. So I was doing that. I was also being more strict with my food, though at that time I didn't really have a healthy relationship with food, I would say. It was mostly just counting calories as a way to drop weight, which I did lose 100 pounds over the course of that year.
Wow, that's impressive.
But at the same time, it also created another form of stress, which is stress around food.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes, which so many people have. And so I had an eating disorder for 6 years after that. That was really quite a journey though. And so but the best thing about all of these experiences, and I also should mention with the eating disorder, I also developed IBS. So I kind of had a lot of things going on.
Yeah. Of course, eating disorder is going to cause IBS. There's no matter even what kind of eating disorder, you're totally ruining your gut health.
Absolutely. Then combining that with it's also known that in the post-weight loss period, there can be a lot of harm that comes to the gut and increased gut permeability and potential changes to the microbiome that could be good in some cases, but also could be detrimental in some cases, depending on also how much weight you're losing. Because if you think about it, a person who's losing a lot of weight, there's a lot of toxicity stored in that fat tissue too. It's not just lipids and fat. It's actually also potential toxins you're exposed to in your environment that are also being dumped into your circulation during that period of time. So that's also a major stressor on the body. So we've kind of covered now environmental stressors, which could be chemical stressors. It could be psychological. It could be like relationship with food, which is also kind of like psychological. But the best part about all these things is that I've always had the kind of mindset where I want to figure out for myself what I can do about it. And I'm not just trying to go to a doctor and have them take my problems away. Obviously, there's a place for medicine, but the standard medical model never really resonated with me because I had been failed by it so many times as a child. So I've always had the mindset like I want to figure out and like kind of be a detective in my life and see where I'm doing things suboptimally, where I could do better, and then how I could make myself feel better. And over the course of that time, I healed my eating disorder, I healed my IBS. I've been completely asymptomatic for like 6 years now. I haven't had the eating disorder for like over 5 years now. Kept the weight off all of this time, and I've just been really working on healing my relationship with my body and also just finding the ways that I can best support myself to feel the best ever. And so that is where this, I think, conversation will end up going, is like the modalities that people can do to help them feel the best, their best radiant selves, and to also just, you know, help them reach all of their goals, whether they're health, fitness, or, you know, other types of lifestyle goals that they may have for themselves, whether it's occupational or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of empowerment that can be had here.
Yes, I mean, that's a very deep and impressive story that you were willing to share here today. I was sitting here and I was like, wow.
It's a journey.
Yes. And look at you today, so strong and also mentally so strong to talk about it without being affected by it, because it was a journey, as I could hear right now. So I understood that you were healing your health with approaching a physical health first in order to be more healthy. Because I think if we are like unhealthy, you can go either way. Improving your physical health or improving your mental health, because they always walk a line. If you're physically not healthy, you're not going to be mentally healthy. And that is just such a proven fact. And anyone out there having any kind of disease or being sick or struggling, it also takes down on your mental health. And so that was exactly what you were also experiencing. And I think it's kind of like very important for people to know that you have to improve both at the same time. But it doesn't even matter where you start. So for you, you started with going to the gym, taking action with Hormetic stress, improving your physical health with it. And then your mental health slowly, of course, over the years came and followed. And look at you now, mentally and physically totally fit and fine. So so I think that is very important for everybody to know that you need to improve both, and they always walk a line. And if one goes to shit, the other one goes to shit. And that's just how our body and our health in general works. And so you gotta approach one way in order to improve your health. And they can start, even if you want to improve your physical health, you can start like approaching a mental health first, and your physical health will even follow. And the other way around. If you're mentally not so happy in a happy place, maybe you're struggling with anxiety, depression, whatever it is, improving your physical health will eventually really help your anxiety, will eventually help your depression and any other kind of like mental health problems that you have.
The thing that I really like about focusing on maybe the mental or psychological perspective first is that there's actually a lot of things that we do in our physical day-to-day that impact our mental health and our psychological well-being. So this is actually why I really like the topic of circadian biology and like the light environment, because something that we don't realize in modern life is just how important our light environment is for shaping our neurochemistry, and specifically with really how it relates to dopamine and how that relates to the kind of behaviors and actions we engage in. So if you have like a very low dopamine state, or you're overstimulated with your dopamine system, that could be like reaching for a lot of fast foods, or like social media addictions, and just like addictions in general, and just kind of engaging in these quick hits of dopamine. That kind of numbs and like dulls out the system. But what we don't realize that's really starting to come to the forefront in circadian and light biology is that our light environment is largely dictating where our dopamine threshold sits, and just how we feel, like how satiated we feel at a baseline, from both like an appetite perspective, but also from just like a life fulfillment perspective as well. So for example, if we're exposed to sunlight, which sunlight was the primary light in the evolutionary environment, we didn't have artificial light sources in the ancestral, environment and landscape. And so the sun really became this major force that shapes the way that our biology is regulated, that we're kind of really only just starting to rediscover, because the way that modern life is structured, it's kind of in disregard of nature. So sunlight is really, really important for building up that baseline dopamine, because essentially there's different wavelengths of light within sun. So we have our UV light part of the spectrum, which is often demonized in Western culture, but it's actually extremely crucial for the regulation of our biology. It not only goes into the brain and it stimulates the production of this really important precursor to hormones called POMC, or pro-opiomelanocortin. This molecule is cleaved into 10 different hormones, which include the 3 primary endorphins in the body. The endorphins are the endogenous opioid molecules that make you feel good. They give you a dopamine boost. They make you feel less anxiety. They make you feel higher mood. You get that directly produced in response to UVB light exposure specifically, so from the sun. And so we're not only getting those endorphins, but we're also getting the alpha and beta MSH molecules cleaved from POMC, which are responsible for regulating energy expenditure, also fat mobilization from adipose tissue, and also our appetite. So when we think about that, then it becomes really clear to see when somebody's deprived of sunlight, now they're going to be reaching for more junk food and more of these very hyper palatable foods because their dopamine levels are lower. They need kind of something else to give them that reward response. And they're also going to have more of an appetite, and they're going to move their bodies less because you're getting less of that impetus from UV light exposure to actually engage in healthy behaviors and have a higher baseline metabolism and be able to actually clear nutrients effectively from the bloodstream. So that's kind of one taste of how sunlight is really, really important in regulating our physiology.
That is very deep, I think, especially for people going through this winter in New York City right now. It is something we definitely want to encourage, to get more sunlight, to get more out. And I mean, just for me to also understand, how much sunlight would we need in order to really profit from it? Because the roof deck at the moment is closed and we're having 6 degrees. I'm definitely not going to lay there in my bikini. So am I not getting enough vitamin D at the moment? Is my daily walks outside, is that already enough in order to get vitamin D through my face? Because everything else is covered like an Eskimo, So what are we doing in the winter times?
Yeah, great question. So there's some nuance to be had here. It depends on your ancestry. So if you have ancestors that hailed from more northern regions of the world, you're naturally going to be more equipped to deal with lower sun conditions in the wintertime because your ancestors also dealt with that. The caveat to that is that if you're not getting sun, you're actually meant to get cold, because our ancestors, when they weren't getting sunlight, it was the wintertime and they were getting more cold. And cold actually has a lot of reciprocal effects that sun has. So they share a lot of the same benefits. So both activate mitochondrial metabolism and support mitochondrial health. Both actually help to produce internal light. So what a lot of people don't know is that, so we all know that we generate our own heat in our bodies. Mm-hmm. Well, heat is just another term for infrared light. So our mitochondria are responsible for making infrared light internally. And when they're activated, when they're turned on, they actually make, that infrared light or that heat. So sunlight from the red and infrared part of the spectrum actually activates mitochondria to make more of their own heat, but so does cold. So if we're not getting cold while we're also in the wintertime and not getting sun, that's where we kind of run into problems with our metabolism becoming really sluggish and inefficient, because we're not getting that kind of reciprocal effect from the cold exposure. At the same time, another thing that you can do if you're trying to dose your sun.
I just got to interrupt you.
Oh, sure.
Are you telling me to leave my jacket at home?
Might not be a bad idea.
No, I mean, I totally, I get your point. The problem is that we are having we're creating constantly an artificial environment, which is not healthy for our body. Yep. We're having artificial lights, we're having artificial heat and cold. We're not living the way our body is supposed to live in nature. Yep. And that creates all sorts of health problems because our body is not, let's say, installed for that. Our body is not programmed for artificial heat. Our body is not programmed for artificial lights. Yep. So if there is less sunlight, of course, we're supposed to be cold. And that would help our metabolism, and that would help our mitochondria function in order to heat up by themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, I gotta understand this because if I am leaving my jacket at home, I think I'm gonna get sick.
Oh, yeah.
Besides the fact that I think I'm already cold with my jacket, but I mean, that is good. That is good. So I think what is kind of like the key point here is to when it's really cold and there's less sunlight, like a day today where it's really cloudy and even snowed earlier, we want to still get outside. We don't want to sit in a cozy home with artificial lights without getting sunlight. We want to take, I think we are allowed to take a jacket, hopefully, but we're going to take a jacket and go outside and feel the cold exposure in order to get the actual cold and to turn on our own heat inside us.
Yep.
So that would be the key in order, if I understood that right.
Yep. And it's also worth mentioning that UV light concentration within sun varies throughout the year, but infrared and red light are pretty consistent throughout the year. So even if it's the wintertime and you're outside in the sun, you're still going to be getting the benefit of red and infrared light from the sun. It's just without the UV light. So it's still really important to get outside regardless of what time of year it is for other reasons too that we should talk about. I just want to circle back briefly to vitamin D, which you mentioned before we move on to like the importance of red and infrared light, but also blue light, which I want to make sure we talk about. But for vitamin D, I really like to think about vitamin D as a biomarker for sun exposure and not as just this marker that we need to optimize by itself, because as it turns out, like the research is really clear that vitamin D status is extremely important if we're thinking about preventing a lot of diseases, including a variety of cancers, diabetes, metabolic disease, autoimmunity. But that vitamin D supplementation, the research is also fairly clear that there's not a huge benefit of supplementing vitamin D. And that's because in my mind, vitamin D is a biomarker for sun exposure and not just something you want to take a pill to optimize. So what I personally recommend is that for vitamin D, you would try to optimize your vitamin D levels between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter. And that if you're maintaining that, especially in the on season, when sun, maybe mid-spring through mid-fall, if you're maintaining that, then you can be sure that you're probably getting enough sun for your body. So it's kind of a biomarker that you can track to see how much sun that you personally need. And for that, I really like the app called D-Minder. You put in your skin type, you put in your location, and then you can start like a sunning session with with the app. You just press start and it will tell you when to flip over for your skin type, and it will tell you how much vitamin D you're making per like second. It like constantly is like a meter that counts for you. So it's really cool.
I'm gonna try that out.
Yep, try that.
As soon as I'm going to Florida.
Yes, you're going soon, so that'd be great.
Yes.
Yes, so that's a great app, and then you can use, I mean, maybe just take a vitamin D at baseline before you start looking to optimize it, so you kind of know where you're generally sitting. Typically, people who have more northern ancestry will have like a little bit higher baseline vitamin D levels just because less sun is required to make vitamin D in paler skin compared to anybody who has more melanated skin. Like the darker skin gets, the more sunlight you need to actually make vitamin D. So that's where like the dosing can be different across people because depending on how much melanin's in the skin, that's going to absorb more more of the UV light. So less vitamin D will be made. So, and that makes sense too, right? Because if you have ancestry from around the equator, you're evolved and supposed to get more sun for your body just based on where your ancestors hailed from.
Yeah, and I mean, it is so important to have enough vitamin D because vitamin D is kind of like suppressing cortisol, our stress hormone, and that will help with stress on your daily basis. And it also helps you, if you have enough vitamin D in your body, it helps you to deal better with the stress that you're experiencing from your environment. It helps you to lower the cortisol levels again and to avoid all the stress disease that are out there. I mean, I would say 90% of all the disease are actually coming from stress. We age because we're having stress. Of course, physical and mental stress. But that stress is what's eventually actually killing us. So that is why it is so important to take any kind of action that we can in order to support our health and to support how we can deal better with stress.
Yeah, I love that. And so maybe this is a good time to talk about blue light because with the cortisol story, this is a very important aspect. So when you wake up in the morning, you're really meant to get bright light in your eyes right away. So if you're waking up with the sun, whether that's sunrise or maybe it's a bit after sunrise, getting that sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning is extremely important for a healthy cortisol response. So a lot of people will talk about cortisol in a very negative way. It's absolutely essential for our health. We need it.
Yes.
It helps to mobilize glucose and fat into the bloodstream to help your organs have the energy they need to basically make ATP and get you up and through the day. But the problem is if you're getting this chronic stress, maybe from a psychological input or maybe from being in a lot of artificial light, then your cortisol kind of stays high throughout the day compared to a normal cortisol rhythm will be peaking shortly after waking up, and then it will gradually decrease throughout the day. And then when it starts to be around sunset and going into the dark time, melatonin starts going up, and that melatonin helps to push cortisol down further. And so we get melatonin and cortisol emerging as these really important, I like to call them like circadian biosensors, but they're basically signals of your light environment. So cortisol is kind of the signal of bright light and like you're up for the day, and melatonin is the signal for darkness and going to sleep. And so that's also why bright light during the day, preferably from the sun, and very darkness at night are both equally important when it comes to regulating our bodies and not only improving our sleep quality and quantity, but also our recovery and regeneration and lowering that baseline level of stress that we have in our bodies. So blue light is actually the signal that comes into the eye and goes into the brain that tells the master clock in the brain that's called the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It tells that SCN what time of day it is. And so that's why it's really important to get that bright light in the morning when you wake up. But then imagine now if you're on your devices, after sundown and it's nighttime and you're on TV or your phone or your computer, those screens and all artificial lights that we find in our environments are very, very enriched in blue light. And so that blue light signal is now telling your brain and the rest of your body that it's the middle of the day or, earlier in the day when it's actually nighttime and time to start winding down. So that becomes really problematic when we're thinking about getting proper rest, recovery, regeneration, and supporting our overall stress levels, because we're sending these mixed signals to the body. On one hand, it's nighttime and we're supposed to be going to sleep soon, but on the other hand, we're sending the signal that it's, early to midday.
Well, I kind of had exactly this experience on my own life, and I tried really my best to help my body with it, because here in New York City, no matter in the middle of the night when I wake up and I have to go to the bathroom or just go and drink something, drink a lot during the night. It's just, but I would leave my bedroom, and the moment I get into the living room, the lights from the city shine inside. And somehow, sometimes it's fine if I leave my eyes half closed, and do that half sleepwalking thing. But if I have my eyes open, that light really wakes me up. And I can feel how my cortisol was waking me up, and I was awake. And then you lay there and then you look at the ceiling and it's starting to turn the clock, and you just can't get back to sleep. And that was clearly not because I had a nightmare, not because I had some thoughts. It was just because of the light getting into my eyes.
Yep.
So I always have all the shades down everywhere so that I don't, that it's always dark during the night. And also what I try to do is, because watching the sunset, watching the sun going over the horizon has an amazing effect on our the blue light that we're getting, and lowering it in order to for us to tell our brain now it's time to release melatonin in order to get to sleep and go and rest. Well, that is just the thing that I think we don't do that in our daily life. We barely do that. And the worst thing is that we have those artificial lights, as you said, full light on and at 10 p.m. So I'm already trying to lowering the light, how you can dim it in the evening. And I don't know, maybe you can tell me, is that actually helping? I feel like it's helping, but because you can't avoid, you cannot walk in the dark in your house after the sun went down. But we kind of have to adopt in our today's society, in today's environment, with having that knowledge. Dimming the lights, I guess, will help a lot after sunset, and trying to lower anything that is that bright light on you, especially light that comes from on top of you, because that's also stimulates our brain. The sun it's midday, it's up. Well, if you have a dimmed light that is down, it could have a similar effect of a sunset to our brain. So that's what I'm trying.
Good. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that we can do in this department, especially as it's becoming more popularized to talk about these topics. There's more technology coming in the market to help us mitigate our less healthy exposures at nighttime, especially. So, for example, I have these blue blocking glasses here on me.
Oh, cool.
So these,
Can I try them on?
yes, try them on. These you can pop on anytime. So I put them on whenever I'm under like a lot of artificial light. So if you wear those, like when I was at Princeton, for example, or at doing my postdoc at Penn, there's a lot of fluorescent lights and there's a lot of just like artificial light and like EMFs around that just make me feel burnt out. That also blue light increases glucose levels in the circulation and impairs mitochondrial metabolism. So if you're under a lot of blue light without red and infrared light, which is what you will get from like LEDs and fluorescent lights, then you're actually impairing your ability to clear glucose. And actually recent studies show that if you eat your carbohydrate meals or just food in general in front of a red and infrared light, then you get less of a blood sugar spike. So that's powerful. And the easiest thing that people can do for that is just eat outside because you're getting that red and infrared light from the sun regardless. But with regards to like blocking blue light at night, you could use blue blockers like these. I also have like light bulbs in my house that change color. So they come with like a little remote. And then you can just change them to like red or orange color at night. So you're not getting any blue light from those lights and you can still kind of see around your home. So those are like two really good options for like, at least in your home, if you're going to be, trying to optimize your light environment. That would be really easy things to do. You can also natively filter out blue light on your phones and computers. And there's actually a place that I recently found that sells like covers.
Can you filter it like on, is it on the device itself?
Yes,
on Apple?
it's like the settings on the Apple Mac.
Show me that later.
It will. It's actually a hotkey
really
for
good.
it too. You just like click the side button a couple times and it will change it for you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I personally keep my phone on amber all day. I don't feel like I need to have the full brightness and like the full blue on. But with regards to dim light, so the qualities of light that matter the most are both the blue content and then also the brightness. So brightness of light will negatively impact your ability to secrete melatonin and just to kind of wind down for the day. So it makes sense that you experience the benefit from that. But then if you can also remove blue light from that light source, you're going to get even more of a benefit from that. So both the brightness and what's called the color temperature, which has to do with the red and the blue fraction.
That's the glasses because I saw everything in red.
Yeah.
So that is taking away all the blue light.
Yep, and it's really cool actually. So if you use these and you look at like something that's pure blue, it literally looks gray. Like you can't see blue.
Yeah, it takes away all of the blue light and it gives it all like a completely warm light.
Yep.
Exactly like a sunset.
Yep, exactly.
Everything looks like as if you're looking into a sunset, like right away, right?
I feel like it increases your mood almost right away too. Like I just always feel more calm when I'm looking like through these lenses, especially if it's like towards the later end of the day. Like when I was on the train, even there's like fluorescent lights on the train and I pop these on because again, we're not really meant to experience blue light in the absence of red and infrared light. Even if it's the middle of the day, like let's say it's summer, middle of the day, we're getting a lot of blue light, but it's always balanced with UV and red and infrared light. So we're never meant to get blue light in isolation, which is what we're encountering in all of our modern devices and indoor lighting fixtures for the most part. So anything we can do to restore the like natural balance of the light frequencies is going to be hugely beneficial when it comes to optimizing the way our body's functioning.
Yeah, I mean, that is also why in the early morning, the sunlight is much more blue light, right? And that is also why our cortisol, I mean, naturally it already like wakes us up. But when we're exposed to that bright blue light into our eyes, we're getting higher levels of cortisol. And that is also what you said earlier. We were going to experience much higher blood sugar levels while cortisol makes us insulin resistant. So when you have a higher level of cortisol, that makes sense that when you eat something, of course, you're going to have a blood sugar spike. Taking these ones would eventually the glasses, they would eventually even help us with our weight management.
Oh, yeah.
And in general, just with our mood and our well-being, because it just lowers the cortisol levels. So it will also help with anxiety and any kind of like stress-related disease and problems that we're having in our daily life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, blue light directly stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight branch of the nervous system. So if we're exposed to a lot of blue light in isolation, like in the absence of red and infrared light, for example, in all of our modern fixtures and devices, that is directly stimulating that fight or flight mechanism, which some people, I mean, it's really common for people to get kind of addicted to stress and stress hormones. That's something that happens, especially if you're in contact with a lot of stressful stimuli over, the course of your normal days, such as like our devices and things like that. We actually know that this was kind of initially founded within like the mafia and the casinos. They found that if you block all the light from the rooms and just put a lot of artificial light, that it actually makes people play on the slot machines longer, and they lose more money.
Oh, wow.
Because the blue light literally like engages that dopamine system and it depletes you. So you're constantly looking for another hit.
Oh, wow. That is pretty impressive.
I know, right?
Strong one. Okay, yeah. That's where we see how much impact it actually has on us and our like behavior throughout the day. But now I gotta ask you, when you put on that glasses during the day, wouldn't it make you feel like, I mean, kind of like, of course, relaxed, but also like, wouldn't it make you feel like tired and you want to go to sleep? And then like, I'm just asking what's happening with your body. You were just coming here, you had the glasses on. Your body is relaxed, your body thinks sunset, kind of like, it's like sunset time. You're like in a rest mood. And now you're sitting here and my camera team is putting all these artificial lights on you. These are blue light, trust me.
Yeah, for sure.
Full speed. So what does that mean to you? Now your body skipped the night basically because you were just like at a sunset mood, relaxed. And now from 1 second to the other, boom, you get hit by a strong like morning light. Wouldn't that interfere with our rhythm, with our circadian rhythm?
So what I'll say about that is that cortisol isn't something that changes very rapidly in response to different inputs. It's something that changes a little more gradually. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are the acute stress hormones released from the adrenal glands, are what kind of acutely will increase in response to a stressor, whereas cortisol is delayed by like 20 to 30 minutes. So for example, when I'm driving over here on the train, in that fluorescent light, which is enriched in blue light, but also there's some UV light in fluorescent bulbs as well, and the absence of red and infrared light is like very harsh on the system. So I'm coming over here for an hour on the train, I'm popping these on. Right now, because we're next to the window and we're getting some more natural light in, I'm not feeling as overstimulated by like the artificial lights because we're also getting that softer natural spectrum of light. Though what I will mention is that people should be aware that glass blocks about 40% of red and infrared light from sun, and it blocks 100% of UV light. So if you're living indoors primarily and you're not getting outside, even if you have windows that are letting some natural light in, it's not actually natural light because it's being filtered.
Of course.
But it is still helpful with regards to like eye strain and cognition. Even if you're like by some windows working, it's going to be way better than working in like a room that's just entirely artificially lit with no natural light. So it's kind of like in the modern world, I would say it's kind of like you have to weigh the pros and cons of each thing. I personally, if I'm going to be under like strictly artificial light without much natural light, I'm going to probably use these even if it's middle of the day. I also have a pair that's about 60% blue blocking instead of 100%. So that's like a little bit less of a dark lens. So that's going to be letting some blue light through, which is going to be good for like the daytime use. I just happen to have these on me today, so I use these. But typically during the day, I'm trying to work outside on my computer or at least by my window, and I try to open it when I can. And also just popping out, in the morning, I'm out for at least 5 to 10 minutes to see like the sunrise or like early morning sun with my bare feet on the ground to get the grounding earthing effect, which is really important. We can talk about that as well. But then I also try to get out for some midday sun, which also has like the different qualities of the light spectrum, especially this time of year, UV light's starting to come back. And then I also try to get out around sunset. And obviously, if the weather's really crappy, like it has been the past few days, I'm getting outside less, but it's still good to get that natural light. And one thing I will also mention for the winter time, I have some light panels in the house that I use. So I have a Spurdy lamp, which is a UVB lamp that you can use inside, that kind of mimics, the effect. It's basically what you will get to make vitamin D and also the POMC molecule I told you about with regards to appetite and mood and all of those things. So UVB light to do that, and then I combine that with a red and infrared light panel, and I use them at the same time, and I specifically focus them on my abdomen because there's nerves under the skin of the abdomen that are really high producers of that POMC molecule I mentioned to you before. So you get kind of the biggest bang for your buck if you expose your abdomen to the sun or to these light panels if you're indoors and it's the winter time and you're trying to still leverage the importance of those frequencies of light, then you can use like some panels like that to get some benefit.
Well, and if we don't take care of our stress levels, our cortisol spikes, and cortisol is kind of like really affecting our digesting. Digestion is parasympathetic. That means it is only in rest and digest, as it says. And when you're constantly stressed, this never happens. So your digesting system is kind of like just stopping. And that creates all these kind of gut issues, IBS, and all that, being bloated and weight issues. And in the end of the day, in your gut, there sits 80% of your immune system. So it affects your entire health.
Yes, absolutely. I love this conversation, not only just because of my history with IBS and healing that for myself, but also just because it's a very actionable area of health that people can really take accountability for and improve their health in like all aspects, as you alluded to, the immune health and polarizing immune cells, either more inflammatory or more anti-inflammatory. That's going to dictate how your overall inflammatory status is manifesting at the level of the whole body. But with regards to stress, like you mentioned, we really need to be getting parasympathetic regularly, especially around meal times. And then you can kind of see that contrasted with a lot of people, eating meals that are already kind of laden with fast foods, like processed foods, but then at the same time, they're going to be on their phones or watching TV and getting blasted with that blue light that's pushing them sympathetic. And then maybe they're also dealing with some work stress or relationship stress or whatever it is that's also pushing them into more of a sympathetic state, away from that parasympathetic digestion capability where there's blood flow going to the gut that's facilitating the breakdown of nutrients and the assimilation of nutrients. Also, parasympathetic states required to release stomach acid into the stomach, to release pancreatic enzymes from the pancreas, to release bile from the gallbladder. All of those secretory to produce saliva as well, another secretory action. So all of those secretory actions require a parasympathetic state. So if you're eating a meal regularly, you're eating meals and you're very stressed out all the time and you're stuck in this sympathetic mode, then you're not actually assimilating nutrients from your food as well. And you're going to be ultimately can create a lot of issues with like fungal overgrowth and parasite infections too, because you're now getting a spillover of nutrients into lower parts of the gut where those food particles aren't actually meant to reach that far. You're supposed to be digesting them and like absorbing them in the small intestine, like the upper part of the small intestine. So if you're getting a lot of spillover of these nutrients into lower parts of the small intestine, it's going to feed the bacteria there. And those bacteria are going to grow, and that can create things like the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where we're essentially now having these organisms being fed that would normally not be accessing those nutrients that they should be absorbed in our upper GI tract. And then that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth can also contribute to issues with small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And that fungal overgrowth in the acute sense can help to scrub glucose from our circulation, because also if we're stressed, our glucose levels are going to be higher and we're going to clear glucose from the circulation less readily. So those fungal organisms can actually help to scrub up that glucose from the circulation, which kind of acutely helps us by helping to protect the microvasculature and the nerves from glucose toxicity. But over the long term, those fungal infections can kind of dig their roots and literally create these structures called hyphae that kind of dig their roots into the intestinal wall. And they can start to create fungal toxins that actually weaken the immune system. And when the immune system is weakened, that can set us up for issues with parasites, because with parasites, we kind of have a couple lines of defenses. We have our skin barrier, we have our stomach acid, and then we have our immune system. And so if you're very stressed out and you also have some fungal overgrowth from this chronic stress, your immune system is weakened, you're not producing stomach acid, and now these parasites that we encounter if we're eating like fresh foods or we're going for a walk barefoot outside in the grass now could become problematic, because our defenses aren't actually elevated enough to prevent an infection from taking root. So with regards to stress and digestion, it's literally everything. It's shaping how much nutrients you're getting from food, but also it's shaping which pathogens and which organisms in the environment are actually going to be able to get a foothold in your system.
It is actually that whenever you're having cortisol levels over a long period of time, it is totally interfering with your entire health. And any digesting, whatever you put into yourself, it is not going to be, it doesn't even matter if you eat something healthy. As you said here, you might get an infection from healthy foods because you're not producing enough stomach acid in order to fight off anything that could possibly harm us. What would you suggest for people what can you do when you have that kind of issues, when you can feel that your digestion is off? Most likely because of stress.
Yes, so there's so much we can do in this department when it comes to reducing our stress levels and helping us to get more parasympathetic, especially before a meal. So not being on your devices while you're eating, probably the biggest thing that you can do, that you can start right away. Or if you're going to be on devices, either, filter the blue light off of your screens. If you have an Apple device, you can filter it with the native settings. I have a reel on my Instagram people can check out on how to do that. Or, if you really need to be on your device for whatever reason while you're eating, you could pop on a pair of like daytime blue blocking glasses, which have about 60% blocking blue light. That's one thing. You also want to make sure that you're not like just eating on the go. Like try to have a meal time that's kind of set and you're not just like cramming it down and just trying to, go about your busy life while you're kind of leaving food as an afterthought. The more you can like kind of create a ritual around your meal, and just even if it's only 10 minutes that you have, just to really just do nothing but eat. And so you're chewing your food very thoroughly, which is extremely important for the digestion process. The chewing process is the first step in digestion. It's setting basically how big the food particles are that are going to the stomach. So you're able to actually extract more protein and minerals from your food when it gets to your stomach. So chewing food thoroughly, really important. And then, and outside of that, we just want to do everything we can to like support our circadian biology in general, because that's going to kind of set the tone for just the baseline stress levels and our stress tolerance as well. So one thing we didn't mention, but kind of alluded to, is that there are ways to improve your stress tolerance to just like everyday life stressors that come your way. And really like dialing in the light environment is huge for that, because it enhances your baseline dopamine levels. It just makes you feel better at baseline. You're going to be more, or less reactive rather. You're going to be more resilient in the face of, some psychological stressors or some work life stressors. It could be whatever it is. It doesn't matter. You're going to be getting a benefit from that. And then outside of that, choosing good whole foods is going to be crucial if we're thinking about managing our glucose levels, which is also really important when it comes to stress. Then we want to think about, like prioritizing protein and vegetables, and maybe if we're going to eat carbohydrates, to maybe have them at the end of the meal, or to kind of hack the carbohydrates so that they're low glycemia. So that, for an example, that would be like making white rice and like cooking it with butter or olive oil and then cooling it down. That facilitates the formation of something called resistant starch. Resistant starch is a type of starch that we don't digest very well, but it can pass into the colon actually and feed a beneficial strain of bacteria in the colon called of the microbiome called bifidobacteria. And so not only does resistant starch spike our blood sugar less, but it also helps to improve our gut microbiome. The last thing I'll mention that's really important, we mentioned getting sun on the abdomen. Well, as it turns out, UVB light, there's something called the gut-skin axis. Basically, the skin and the gut are talking to each other all the time. And if you get UV light on your skin, it actually helps to increase gut microbiome diversity and helps to make your gut microbiome more resilient to any sort of incoming pathogens or changes in response to, your environment and things like that. So that helps to build resilience at the level of the bacterial communities in the gut. So that's another just kind of bonus for getting your light environment dialed in and not fearing UV light. And I should mention also that in order to get the benefits of UV light, you really need to expose both your eyes and your skin simultaneously. So that means if you're wearing sunglasses while you're getting sun, that's not going to give you most of the benefit, because your POMC is being produced in your brain and also in your skin, and both of them need to be produced at the same time in order to maximize the benefit.
Oh, that's very interesting that you just so also on your skin, that means exposure and like taking off your clothes, basically. Okay, yeah. Towards what you said in the beginning, that's exactly a problem what we are creating with our social life these days. People would just eat on the go.
Yep.
Whenever, like, the worst thing that I could see here in New York is actually you're at Times Square and you would go through Times Square while you're eating something even worse, like the typical New York City pizza slice, and that is probably the worst thing that you can do to your stress levels, and then of course to your digestion. And what also kind of like is a side effect and kind of like a really tricky road here is the moment your digestion goes down and the moment you're starting to have these IBS problems, and you don't produce enough stomach acid, and you just don't feel like your body kind of like stops the digestion mode. That is a moment when actually healthy food will feel much harder for you to eat.
Yes.
And that is like a really bad circle, because like raw vegetables, which are very healthy, full of fiber, full of vitamins, they're not so easy to digest for your stomach. So eating raw vegetables will give you a hard time. And those people, they will automatically choose rather a chocolate bar then, because it feels better. It just slides down, And that is when your digestion doesn't really work. That's where it kind of like you start getting into a really bad cycle, because you're not even working with your body, trying to help it, because what just naturally feels better for you in this moment would be something that just goes down very easy. White bread, chocolate bar. You would rather eat that than eating healthy vegetables and maybe some chicken or protein or fish, or if it's tofu, or also broccoli, for example, is hard for us to digest, but super healthy. And so if you're having stomach issues, you would be like, oh, I can't eat that. I don't feel good afterwards. And so at one point, you're going to be like, I can't eat vegetables. I can't eat that. I can't eat broccoli. I can't eat that. But what you can eat, what you think you can eat, are the candies, are the sweets, are like cereals, things that just go down your stomach as it's nothing, because it doesn't require your rest and digest mode as much as actually all these healthy foods that would really nutrition you and actually help you with the stress in order to get better. So that cycle, I don't know, I'm sure with your story of your past, you might have been there and you know what I'm speaking about. And I think anybody out there having IBS problems knows exactly what I'm speaking about, how much more appealing are these foods that just go down, because it just would in the moment make you feel better, but in the long term is going to make your situation worse and worse and worse. So what would you suggest anyone? How do you get out of this cycle? What can you do?
Yeah, so typically if we're getting a lot of bloating or gas from like our healthier meals that contain some vegetables or fibers, or like FODMAPs, they're generally called, a lot of people and even doctors will say you need to go on a low FODMAP diet. So I have a lot of problems with this. First of all, because the FODMAP containing foods are often like very healthy plant foods. In the short term, you can remove them to get some like symptom reduction. But if there's no long-term strategy to actually address the root issues, then you're going to be depriving yourselves of nutrients over time. So typically what happens if we're getting a lot of gas or bloating in response to these foods is that there's inflammation at the level of the gut. And if the gut is inflamed, what happens is it actually changes the microbiome composition, because whenever there's inflammation, it tends to bring blood flow and oxygen to the area. And a healthy colon, where the microbiome primarily resides, actually requires a very low oxygen environment. It's a hypoxic environment. So the microbial communities start to shift their composition in response to this inflammation. But in addition to that, the transport of molecules called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, they're often abbreviated as, actually requires a low inflammation environment. So whenever inflammation starts in the gut lining, it inhibits the transport of these molecules. And these molecules are made when bacteria digest these FODMAPs. And so what happens if this transport is inhibited, we start to get the buildup of these gases, and that literally creates like bloating and gas in response to the meal. So if people are getting like gassy or bloated in response to these foods, that's an indication to me that there's inflammation at the level of the gut that needs to be dealt with. So some powerful anti-inflammatory mediators would be things like red and infrared light, which directly stimulates the mitochondria. We can kind of think of inflammation as being molecular chaos at the level of mitochondria. Basically, you're not getting proper flow of electrons through mitochondria to make energy production. You're getting overproduction of reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species, which are these like charged molecules that play important roles, but if there's too much of them, essentially they start leaking out of the mitochondria and they start damaging other parts of cells and creating this just very inflammatory, acidic environment. And so if we have this kind of state, we need to go in and support mitochondria to the best of our ability. So using light and leveraging light, especially the red and infrared light, but also the UV light, absolutely crucial if we're thinking about optimizing mitochondrial health. But in addition to that, we also can like acutely reduce inflammatory status by like leveraging omega-3 fatty acids, which are inherently anti-inflammatory, reducing the omega-6 fatty acids coming in through the diet, which are like in processed oils, processed foods. A lot of processed foods have like canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower, all of those, corn oil, soy. Those are all going to be enriched in omega-6. So reducing those, which actually promote the production of inflammatory mediator called arachidonic acid. So if you kind of prioritize omega-3s and reduce omega-6, that can help to reduce inflammatory burden. You can also consume things like polyphenols from dark red fruits and vegetables. That helps to quench inflammation in the gut. There's a specific polyphenol in citrus called hesperidin that's really good at acutely reducing inflammation in the gut. So we can kind of stack these things together and kind of put together like a short-term anti-inflammatory protocol, and then start to gradually increase exposure to these fermentable molecules like these FODMAPs. And ultimately, that helps to actually improve the microbiome because the FODMAPs feed bifidobacteria, which are this really crucial group of bacteria in the gut that help to make the whole body's immune system more anti-inflammatory, including the gut. So we really want to support bifidobacteria if we're thinking about optimizing inflammatory status throughout the body and specifically within the gut as well.
Just want to mention here at this point is that the moment you're having gut issues and the moment your gut is not feeling well and you're having, it immediately affects your mental health.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people are just not aware of that. People would have anxiety, people would be like super stressed out and maybe depressed. And what is actually causing the issue is maybe not your environment. It might be your digestion. It might be your gut, because your gut has a nerve going directly into your brain and it's sending its signals both ways. But what is very important for you to understand is that once one is going down, it reflects the other. So it can go both ways. But if you're having bad gut bacterial, that means if you're having it over a long period of time, you're going to eventually have a bad mental health. So it really can, what you're just saying can actually be the cause of people having every kind of mental issues, depression, anxiety, and not feeling well, not being able, to wake up and feel happy and it's a great day. And that is so important for people to know that this connection can go both ways. It does not only be that when you're like mentally, maybe from the environment, you're not feeling well, then your gut is also being affected and eventually will go to shit. But if you're having gut issues and if you're not nutrition yourself right and your gut is out of balance and you're having all these kind of like problems, IBS, eventually your mental health is going to suffer on it. And that's where like the whole, when you start going downhill, it starts with the health. Sadly, it starts at one point and it takes everything with it. It is not like as we think, oh, I just bumped my toe. No, now my toe is hurting and it's going to heal and that's it. When you have something chronically and when you have something that is within you and lasting over a long period of time, it takes everything down. So it is so important to know what you can do in order to get out there and to support your health.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the way that I think about most chronic ailments in general, and this really just applies to just about anything you can think of, is focusing on mitochondria and how their health is doing. So they're going to be impacted by a lot of things. It's going to be impacted by our diet. It's going to be impacted by our exposures. Like I mentioned earlier, mold toxins directly impair mitochondrial function. Antibiotics impair mitochondrial function. Also, if you're exposed to antibiotics or pesticides or herbicides through your diet, those are also impacting mitochondria and also the microbiome. Microbiome and mitochondria also share a lot of overlap because mitochondria are derived from bacteria. If you look at like the lineage of eukaryotic cells, there was this like theory that's called the endosymbiont theory that basically states that there was a single-celled organism that merged with the bacteria and created this first organism that actually had a mitochondria. They basically decided to stay as one unit because they were somehow better together. And so anything that is harmful to bacteria is also typically harmful to mitochondria as well. And they share a lot of functional and structural overlap. So if we're thinking about optimizing our mitochondria, this also relates to like electromagnetic frequencies in the environment because mitochondria also are very sensitive to our electromagnetic radiation. And typically in the ancestral environment, that would be from the sun. But now we're seeing all different types of EMFs emerge in the modern environment just from our technologies. Things like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 5G, 4G, 3G, all of those. And I think the research on these frequencies showing that they're like safe is very shoddy as it relates to the real world because they're only ever looking for a short period of time in isolation at like a single frequency. Meanwhile, in the real world, especially like here in New York City, we're exposed to like 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and then also like the processed foods and the blue light and everything at once all day, every day. And so I think the effects of that are kind of untold and also they like synergize in a negative way. And so the more we can mitigate our interactions with these things and just like be more conscious about the way that we're living in general, I think there's a lot that we can do, like with regards to grounding too. I mentioned earlier, if you have your bare feet or your palms of your hands on the earth, you directly receive free electrons from the earth, and electrons are the currency for energy production. So it's literally a way to get free energy from the earth. If you're especially at the beach, it's like the best way you can ground because of the salt water. And in the sand, you're basically getting like the superconduction of electrons into your body. So, and I think
I guess
honestly,
that explains why we all love the beach.
yes, everybody feels amazing at the
I think
beach.
I've never heard a person saying I don't like the beach.
I know.
It's like everybody loves the beach, right?
Yes.
So that explains just why.
We're getting the sun, we're getting
Yeah.
the grounding. It's like
Yeah.
that's a very natural environment that is actually at least somewhat retained culturally.
Eventually, everything that like interferes with our mitochondria function is kind of physical and mental stress.
Yep.
All of that is interfering with the health of our mitochondria.
Yep.
And whatever we can do in order to lower our stress levels, like grounding, like nutrition ourselves in the right way, as you said, like trying to avoid all the blue lights throughout the day, that is going to help our mitochondria function and our entire health, obviously. Mitochondria is kind of like why we're breathing, why I am laughing, and why I'm talking.
Yes.
Yeah. And
That's for sure.
exactly.
And this also, I can tie this back to like the bifidobacteria story also. So I mentioned earlier bifidobacteria and their importance. So in the infant gut microbiome, when a baby's born like vaginally and they're being breastfed, the microbiome is upwards of like 90% or more bifidobacteria because breast milk contains these molecules called human milk oligosaccharides that are specifically there to feed bifidobacteria. And the job of bifidobacteria in the infant gut is literally to train the immune system to allow the immune system to know which bacteria and which exposures are good and what is self and what is other, essentially. And that's also why we see if children aren't breastfed, that they're going to be more prone to asthma and autoimmune diseases and inflammatory diseases in general, because the immune system doesn't have the right data set to actually be able to tell what's a pathogen or what needs to be eliminated and what is good and safe and like what is self. So training bifidobacteria is extremely important, and we can also leverage this as adults too. So we see in like the healthy aging process that bifidobacteria levels are higher relative to individuals who develop chronic diseases. So if we can support bifidobacteria levels even as adults, then we can get some health benefits from that. And this specifically relates also to tuning that immune system, because we mentioned earlier, but up to 80% of the immune cells in the body are surrounding the gut. And those bifidobacteria are directly interfacing through metabolite exchange with the immune cells. And the happier the bifidobacteria communities are and the bigger they are, the more the right signals are being sent to the immune cells to create more of an anti-inflammatory environment within the gut, but then also with the body as a whole.
So optimizing your gut health is one way to get more resilient to stress and to be more healthy, but also hormetic stress, which we really want to talk about it, because hormetic stress needs to be distinguished from all the stress that we were just talking about. Physical stressors like bad diet, light, and mental stress, which is fighting with your, close people around you, or work stress or whatever. The hormetic stress is the kind of like stress that we put on ourselves in terms of like cold water, heat exposure, workout, any like being active. And I think the most important people need to understand, when is it a hormetic stress? It is when you can adapt to the stress with breathing. For example, when you do the cold plunge, and if you're not able to adapt to it, you're going to be sick the next day, because then it was not a good kind of stress. But when you're able to adapt with breathing and calming yourself down, it is a great kind of stress. It is hormetic stress. And what it actually does is also, like with workouts, you're increasing oxygen within your whole body. And oxygen is so necessary for our mitochondria function and our entire health. And it also helps to decrease cortisol and our stress levels again, so you're more resilient to the kind of stress that you're experiencing. So as you said in the beginning, you struggled from having all these kind of stressors on your body, and you were overweight and you were not feeling great. You started with getting out of there. You started to get out of there with hormetic stress. You started working out, and you started to increase your oxygen levels through the day in order to have more energy, in order to have better mitochondria function, and in order to get back to the healthy person that you were before and that you are now. That is like the power of hormetic stress. And I think you can tell that from your own story, how much it helped you.
Absolutely. And I mean, actually, as it relates to oxygen, I'll just mention one thing briefly, and that is that UVA light, we talked about UVB for vitamin D and POMC, but UVA light is a major stimulus for nitric oxide, which is the molecule that actually allows for vasodilation of the blood vessels. So allowing the blood vessels to kind of spread into the tissues, into the skin, and deliver nutrients and oxygen to tissues. So extremely important when it comes to blood pressure regulation, but also that nutrient and oxygen delivery. But outside of that, yes, hormesis is really important. And one of the most important aspects of hormesis is that we're engaging voluntarily in the activity. So that actually changes the way our brain is engaged in the stressor. So if we're facing a stressor head on and we're tackling it and like we're being brave and courageous and in pursuit of this thing, that engages a different neurochemistry than it does if like we're being a victim to a circumstance. So like actually forcing somebody to do a cold plunge, for example, not the best idea. They need to want to do it and like to go and do that for themselves as an example. But when you take on things like in a forthright manner, it actually helps you build that dopamine and gives you that dopamine reward that helps you to actually continue the pattern and the behavior over time. So just really important when it comes to all hormesis, and that could be from like things like sauna or cold exposure or exercise, all really good ways to help build resilience. And again, the dose also is important here. So like you don't want to do any of these things to the point of burnout where you're like pushing yourself too hard. We want to get just to the point of discomfort really, but then not continue that for an extended period of time necessarily, because that's when it starts to kind of have an overly stressful effect on the body. So the dose is really important, and depending on if you're new to a specific type of hormetic stressor, then you might want to start small and build your way up. You don't want to just go 0 to 100, like go from never getting cold into an ice bath immediately. That's going to be a huge shock to your system. But gradually, just maybe starting with like 65-degree water and like maybe gradually decreasing the water temperature, or like doing a cold shower for like 30 seconds and then going back to warm. Just getting yourself acclimated a little bit to it and just dipping your toes in the water, and then gradually you can increase your resilience, and then you can more and more be able to take on more in all aspects of your life, not just in that one stressor, but you can now apply that resilience to any aspect of your life where you're encountering some sort of a challenge.
Exactly. It is always the adaptation that we want to approach with that. So if somebody has never worked out in their life, running a marathon will definitely not be a hormetic stress.
Correct.
While if somebody who's working out a lot approaches a high intense training, it can still be a hormetic stress, even though it's very high intense. But yeah, so it is always adapting to it and increasing your resilience. And I think the more resilient you are in general in life, the tougher you are, the better it is going through this life, because this life is definitely not going to leave you out with stress, as much as we wish we could all just escape from it. It's going to come on us. And the more resilient we are, the better you're going to be able to deal with life and be healthy on the long run, and nothing can kick you off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just kind of being empowered in general. And I mean, this just applies to so many different aspects of life, but really just trying to take our power back in all the different ways that we can, not outsourcing responsibility to other people or to the experts or to the science or whatever you want to call it. Like instead trying to make decisions for yourself based on your own like understanding of things, instead of just kind of just taking on ideas because somebody else said it. I think it's really, really important just facing things head on and doing what we can to regain that empowerment. It's going to improve our health because we're now going to be much more conscious of what we're actually doing. We're not just going to be going with the crowd and doing what everybody else is doing, because if you want to be functional in a dysfunctional society, like that's going to create illness. Like the norm in this society is autoimmunity, cancer, diabetes, obesity.
That is so true. So you got to step aside from that, do your own thing. And I think always like also in terms of like hormetic stress and other kind of stress, you need to listen to your body. Your body will tell you what is a hormetic stress and what is not. And I think that is very important to have that said at this point, that no doctor can tell you how long you have to work out in order to stay in a hormetic state, how cold the water has to be, or any kind of like things that you want to approach. It needs to be your own body talking to you, and you need to listen to your body. That should be always your most trusted source.
Yeah. And actually this ties really nicely in with the conversation of like parasympathetic versus sympathetic, because the sympathetic nervous system really puts us in our brains and into our limbs, like getting ready to run or flee or fight. The parasympathetic state is really associated with like tuning in and like that yin response and really just like listening internally to what's going on. And so the more we actually have that like interoception, it's called, if we're like sensing inward, the better our relationship with our bodies become. And the earlier we can detect when things go wrong, so we don't have to develop an overt disease. Instead, we can catch things early and like course correct before we end up with like a visit from the pain teacher that's like screaming in the form of like cancer or diabetes. Instead, we know early on, like, oh, something's not right. I'm going to deal with it now so that it doesn't spiral over time.
Exactly, yes.
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, if people want to start to learn about this and dip their toes, especially in the world of like circadian biology, I do a lot of work in this area. So I have a free lesson on light biology interactions that people can find in my link in bio on Instagram. And that comes with a protocol for circadian optimization that talks about all of the ways that you can optimize your light environment to improve your mitochondrial health and just improve your overall mood and psychological well-being in all aspects of your life. So people can find that. And I also work with some clients one-on-one. I'm also doing a lot of teaching through my business. So there's lots of different ways to work with me if people are interested and have been resonating with what we've been talking about.
I'm really glad that you were here today and we could talk so much about it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Health Hacks. I hope today's episode gave you more knowledge to improve your health.